You mentioned what I would call testability. You can test Newton's laws and all this kind of thing. And I'm constantly up against the question, how can you as a scientist believe this stuff when it's not testable? And I say, who said it isn't testable? You see, why am I sitting here as a Christian? Because I've tested the claims that Christ has made. Let me give you one simple example. We might want to deal with this later on, I don't know, but Christ promises that those who trust him and receive him will receive peace with God and forgiveness and a new life and a new power. I've seen that happen to me and to people endless times. And when you see 2 and 2 make 4 all the time, you begin to believe that 2 and 2 make 4. I think it's eminently testable. And so, to come back on Michael's side for a moment, I think there are different levels of argument, Michael. You mentioned testing laws in a laboratory, but there are many things in science, as we know, that are not testable. You can't test the origin of life in the lab. You have to make an inference to the best explanation in the past. And that is true of many things. So for me, the evidence on which my faith is based is cumulative. Part of it is objective, intellectual, arguments and all this kind of thing. But a great deal of it has to do with the evidence of, does it actually work in life?
Right, so, John, joking aside, this is an important question. It fundamentally boils down to, if you do believe there's a designer behind the whole show, why are there so many awful things in the world? And that's a question that's been asked since, well, time immemorial, isn't it? Where do you want to begin with that one, coming at it from, a scientist's point of view?
Well, this is a huge question, of course, but the first point I would make is there are two separate questions. There's the recognition that there's a mind behind the universe. That's one question. And I believe that science can tell us something about that. But then there's a second question. Who is behind the universe? And what is his character and what is his nature? Now, when it comes to the question of evil, moral evil and natural evil, I think about this a lot because I find it's the hardest question for any of us. There's no two ways about it. And if you want a short response, it'll have to be short. My approach to it is, first of all, it seems to me atheism doesn't solve it. It solves it in an intellectual sense, that people say, like Dawkins, the universe is just like you'd expect it to be. When at bottom there's no good, no evil, no justice, and we just have to face it. Well, if that is correct, of course, it means you've solved the problem. You've removed it in some sense, but what you haven't removed is the suffering and the pain. So I find that philosophically a disaster. But now, in order to respond to it as a Christian, I have to come down to the heart of the Christian faith. And this is the very short answer. At the heart of the Christian faith, there stands a cross. And if that really is God there, then it tells me that God hasn't remained distant from this problem, but has himself become part of it. And the cross and the resurrection together seem to me to do what atheism's solution to this problem doesn't do. They give us grounds for hope. And I face a universe, as Michael does, that presents a mixed picture. It's like a ruined cathedral, Coventry Cathedral. You can see traces of beauty and you can see the marks of bombs. I call it beauty and barbed wire. And whatever our philosophy is or our worldview, we have to cope with that because that's the reality. And the only way that I can see a window into it, I can't solve it, I wouldn't pretend to, or insult anybody's suffering by so doing. I've been to Auschwitz many times and wept every time. But I would say this, we will never solve the problem philosophically of what a good God should, would, might, could, etc. have done. So we've got a problem. And as a mathematician, if you can't solve one problem, you ask a different one. And the different question for me is, granted that it's like that, is there anywhere in the universe evidence that there's a God that we could trust with it? And I believe there is, as revealed in Jesus Christ. That's my short answer.
Okay.
Thank goodness we didn't get the long one. Sorry, that was uncalled for.
But Michael, I suppose at this point John does turn to his Christian faith in a rather